Welcome in. It is another edition of Fifth Avenue Faceoff. I'm Chris Mack of the Fan Morning Show, Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. And we are here to take you through absolutely everything Pittsburgh Penguins. And we'll start as we bring in our friend Eric Tangradi, former Penguin, current Shady Side Academy head coach at Tangradi on Twitter, as we do a couple times every week. We'll start, Tango. Let's go back. Let's rewind about 72 hours. And I'm going to ask you, not just what your initial reaction was 72 hours ago on Friday afternoon, but now that you've had some time to digest everything, what do you make of what Ron Hextall did at the deadline, I guess, over the course of the last week and a half? And did he make his team any better?
It's hard. It's hard now, I guess, to say. I think that it was. I guess it's just been consistent with what he's been saying as far as not wanting to make that big, astronomical change. I think we all agreed that change was necessary in the bottom six. But when I look at the pieces and then I look at what the rest of the teams in the Eastern Conference did, like they're still missing sandpaper, they're still missing grit.
Right.
You take on a ton of salary for bottom six guys that I think the positivity is in the fact that there needed to be a shakeup and there needed to be change, and now you're getting some production. But overall scheme of things, no, I don't think the team is in a better place. I just think some guys who needed to step up have stepped up, and they've started to have success because of that.
Yeah, it feels like, and Joe Starkey said this to me on Friday when we did a little trade deadline roundtable. If nothing else, it's addition by subtraction. Like, to your point, you've gotten some of the guys out of there that were, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, dead weight. You've moved them out. You've brought some guys in, particularly a guy, you mentioned Sandpaper. He's not your typical, like, dig his elbow into the back of your head in the corners kind of guy. But Bonino's, I think, a good example of a guy who knows what it takes to win in late April, May, and early June. If you get that deep, he's proven it here. So I like that addition. I honestly think Dmitry Kulikov could be an under the radar steal for as far as a guy. Again, you talk about a guy who may be a little harder to play against, and they need that depth on the left side of defense. We'll see who he ends up getting plugged into the lineup for. Sounds like it's going to be for POJ at first instead of Dumoulin, but we'll see how that goes in the next few days. But I agree. Incremental improvement, but not enough to make me go, ooh, okay. When you saw so much go on in the Eastern Conference, I mean, Meyer, Kane, O'Reilly, everything Boston did, it's hard to look at the Pens and feel like they were really able to keep pace. And so, yeah, I think I'm with you. If it's improvement, there's not enough there to make you think that this team goes from a first round exit maybe to maybe they steal around. But whatever they did last week, I don't think changed your expectations of the postseason necessarily.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, biggest eye opener to me was just watching what teams did. Like Boston and Tampa basically made it clear to the rest of the Eastern Conference that our top six, we feel, can beat your top six. But now you want to play against our bottom six. You want to play hard minutes against Ross Colton, Tanner Jeannot, Nick Pauline. You want to add Bertuzzi to Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederick. Like those are scary third lines that have the ability to completely shift playoff games. So like what you talked about, sure, the top six for Pittsburgh has been fantastic and outstanding, but they just needed, I think, that one piece in the third line, that one center, that one grit winger that could really add a different dynamic to just the optics of looking at that line on the stat sheet as another team. Like, are you scared to go in and play against Pittsburgh's third and fourth line right now? Like, probably not. Where
Yeah,
I look at Bertuzzi, Frederick, and Coyle, I'm like, whoa. I see Jeannot, Paul, and Ross Colton. Whoa.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, that there's not a lot, and it doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be the smear your face against the glass kind of guy, but just the amount of work rate that's going to have to go in against those third lines as opposed to a Penguins third line of, say, I don't know, Heinen, Carter, and Granlund or whatever it may be. You don't go into that one against the Penguins necessarily thinking you're going to have to put in the kind of work that you are against those other ones. But it brings about a question too, because one of the guys I thought did have a decent game down in Florida over the weekend was one of the new additions in Bonino. Other than that, there weren't a lot of bright spots against the Panthers. They come out slow again, the Penguins do. Ricard Raquel was asked about it after the game. I think he guessed, he threw out a theory that maybe when they're trying to simplify things, they're making things too simple. I don't know if that's really a possibility. I don't know what it is, but how do they fix these slow starts, not just to periods in some cases, but as we saw again Saturday in Florida, to whole games, they've got these slow starts.
Yeah, that's the $1,000,000 question, and that's what I think. It just has to be somebody else that drives the bus on certain nights. I agree. I think Benino's a great addition. I think in the locker room, pedigree, another voice, somebody who blocks shots, wins faceoffs late in games, penalty kill. But is that the guy, or is there a line that you can throw out against Barkov's line to mitigate a couple shifts for Sid and then for Gino to play against top 6 forwards to create chances? We talk about those other teams. Like, can you throw Carter's line out there against Marchand's line and say, all right, they're going to give us some 5-on-5 even hockey shifts like that?
Right.
That's the challenge. And that's what I think. You can't have these top 6 guys put 2-3 points on the score sheet every single night to be successful. And that's just a perfect case of a long road trip. Need a spark from somebody else, get caught flat, and now the game's over.
So what do they do? They're back home now for 5 games, 3 of them against non-playoff teams, starting with Columbus on Tuesday. What's the key to maybe finding some of those things that they're going to need down the stretch and into the playoffs, assuming they make it there? How can they find some of those things that they need to, that it felt like they found during the 4-game winning streak, to be honest, 18 goals in those 4 games. And a lot of it came from the guys on the depth lines, right? You saw Drew O'Connor playing well. You saw, Jeff Carter wasn't necessarily lighting the scoreboard up, but he was playing better than he had. What can they do against the Columbuses, the Flyers of the world over the next week to ensure that they're finding, for lack of a better way to put it, that cliche, finding their game earlier and more often?
Yeah, it's simple. I think they just have to get pucks deep and be resilient on the forecheck and get over pucks. Sustained offensive zone time, maintaining offensive zone time. As third and fourth line, nobody's expecting you to have 2, 3, 20-goal scorers. But what, they are expecting, and I think that's where some of the advanced analytics are valuable, is like, are we pushing the puck in the offensive zone? Are we sustaining time? Are we wearing down the other team's defense? Are we doing those little things? Or are we defending the whole time and then having to feel like we have to get Sid's line and Gino's line back out to create momentum? All I think they need to focus on is just creating momentum. And I don't think any of those players on those lines they're very capable of doing that. And it was nice to see them get rewarded with some production on the road. But now that you're at home, I'm going to be watching the minutes. I'm going to be watching how are these minutes distributed at home, because Mike Sullivan gets last change. He gets to dictate his confidence in his bottom 6 moving forward. Like, I'd like to see that fourth line get up to like 12, 13 minutes. I'd like to see that third line get somewhere around 14 to 16. Like, Sid and those guys are going to play around 20, and that's fine. But is there going to be kind of that disbursement of minutes that actually show confidence from the coach that this is a winning culture moving forward?
No, they've got to find. We've talked about consistency for how long with this team now? It feels like for the last two months, really, is consistency. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you can find it over the course of the next 5 games, with 3 of them, like I said, against non-playoff teams and teams that are way out of it, in Columbus and Philly, and even a team like Montreal that's way out of it, but that feels like it's starting to find their direction, if nothing else. Then hopefully you can find that consistency against the better teams on the schedule too, including 3 really big games coming up in the next couple of weeks against the Rangers. So there was a great stat tweeted out over the weekend, and I want to give credit to it, credit where it's due, to where it was tweeted out. And now I'm gonna screw that up because I lost it. But there was it was tweeted out, points percentage by goalie, right? The difference between starters and backups. And how about this? The Penguins have a .693 points percentage with Tristan Jarry in the net. That's, I want to say, 4th or 5th best in the league. With their backup in the net, Casey DeSmith, just a .451 points percentage. It's the largest disparity between starter and backup in the league. I don't know if that's all on Casey DeSmith. It strikes me they've played differently in front of Jarry than they do in front of DeSmith. So I'll ask you this. Is this purely on the guys on the ice? What can Mike Sullivan do about it? Or was it on Ron Hextall to do something about the position before last Friday?
Yeah, I looked at the market. There really wasn't a lot of great options out there. Like, did you want to go out and make, with the salary cap issues, go after Quick? That's kind of the only one that I could see as being a good fit. But the market, there was a premium for having him.
Right.
Um, I think that stat can be a little bit skewed only because the backup generally plays a majority of back-to-back games. So not to
Mm-hmm.
mention he's getting stuck in these tough situations. He's also getting players on back-to-backs. And we had talked about their record with kind of being an older group in some of these back-to-backs, but that's no excuse. I mean, looking forward, they have the Rangers back-to-back after Philly, and then they're going to go play at Colorado, at Dallas back-to-back, which is no easy task either. But I think you have to just ride at this point that Jari hasn't played enough, that maybe he's got enough energy and enough in the tank that you can ride him into some of these uncomfortable situations where he's going to have to play more games than you'd wanted. But I think that comes down more to the players. Sure, certain times, certain periods, certain spurts of games, you need goalies to stand up and kind of steal moments. But when you look over a 60-minute sample size, like there have been some games where the team's just been flat from start to finish, and I don't think
Right.
you can point that all on the goalie.
So credit to Adam Gretz, by the way. He's the one that tweeted it out. I want to make sure I get that in there. Freelancer who covers hockey here in Pittsburgh. Before we let you go, two with Tango. Give me a story. There's got to be a good story from a deadline day in your past where something, we hear these stories. Like I heard Elliot Friedman tell a story over the weekend about how he thought JVR was headed to Detroit, but he blew the story and he apologized for it openly and honestly. No guy ever wants to think that they're getting traded unless they're actually asking for the trade, probably, and they're getting shipped out to a better situation. So just, I guess, what's it like around a club on deadline day, especially when you're on a team that you know somebody's going to be making a deal? And have you ever seen something crazy happen, whether it was traveling, in the locker room? Just what's the vibe like around deadline day in the NHL for a player?
For a player, I think on a personal level, it's a very weird situation. I think when you're getting traded, there's kind of that. It's very humbling. I mean, some guys who kind of are not arrogant, but have that confidence and that swagger, and then they start to hear that they're being traded. It can be hard. I mean, as a human being, just to think about in sports, like basically people dangling you around like you're a pawn in the chessboard. Like it's a hard feeling emotionally. As far as locker rooms go, guys are great. I mean, someone's on the trade block, you walk in, and it's like, oh, your bag's packed yet? Like guys are playing jokes with each other. Like it's just a part of the business that you have to make light of every single situation. I'll never forget one of my craziest experiences when I got sent down to the minors in Winnipeg. I got a phone call from Mark Bergevin that I had been traded to Montreal, and thinking I'm going to go back to the hotel and fly out of Winnipeg. I ended up walking across the dressing room and playing an exhibition game with the Hamilton Bulldogs. So the team I got traded to was playing against the current team I played for. So I just packed my bags, went down the hall, suited up, and played a game that night against the same guys that I had been battling in training camp with. So again, that feeling of like, we're human beings, we play the late game you love. Like this business can really get ugly and suck the love of the game out of you a little bit at times, because you're just, you're a name on a piece of paper, and if you're not producing, you move on. So other than that, like it's just a part of the business. I don't have any like crazy stories where somebody's got traded and anything like that. But I mean, there have been times where guys find out like at the rink, like they don't, or they find out on the internet before they even hear from the coach. And, you're like, am I traded? What just happened? That stuff happens all the time.
Well, that's wild enough, I think, is going through a practice or a morning skate and then later that night being like, hey, down the hallway, pal, you're on the other squad now. That would do it for me. That would be the cold water in the face about the business being the business right there. So great stuff today, Tango. We appreciate it as always. We'll catch up with you again later in the week and see if this team starts to take some of the trade deadline additions or subtractions or whatever you want to call it and make something out of it. We appreciate it as always, dude.
No, thank you. And I think, what did we say? Did we say March 13th? Is that what our date was of where we're going to see where this team's at? I think they did an unbelievable job on the road, grabbing some big minutes, like that win against Tampa. Obviously, to
Yeah.
let one slip in Florida was disappointing, but I feel like that's a turning point, like awesome win for that team to finally get some belief back in that locker room. So huge stretch of games here. I mean, 4 games and was it 6 nights, and then leads us to the 13th, and that'll be a good, real kind of clear path of where things are headed for this team.
Yeah, and then that week of 3 against the Rangers, sandwiched around 1 against the Canadiens. That's huge too. Appreciate it as always, Eric.
Thanks.
March 19th, March 13th. It feels like every week is a milepost at this point for this team, especially now that we're post deadline. March 19th, we'll have put those games against the Rangers in the rear view, and we'll have an idea of whether this team has a chance of maybe even crawling out of a wild card spot and catching New York, or the Rangers have put some distance between themselves and the Pens. The games in hand will start to catch up, as Tango mentioned. There are 4 games in the next 6 days. A lot going on, and a lot more to talk about. Aaron Portzline covers the Blue Jackets for The Athletic in Columbus. We'll catch up with him in just a few moments, but look, the man won a contest. We should reward him fair and square. Patrick Damp of KDKA TV 2. He's also a Penguins columnist, co-host of the Dying Alive podcast with Jesse Marshall, Mike Darnay. At Synonym for Wet, Pat Damp, next on Fifth Avenue Faceoff. Welcome back in. Follow us on Odyssey at AUDACY. You go in there in the app, you hit follow, bing, and you'll get every episode of Fifth Avenue Face-Off delivered to you. Unfortunately, it doesn't make a cute little bing sound like that, but it should. I'm going to talk to the bosses about that later. Chris Mack of the Fan Morning Show and Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan here with you, joined by the man who named the podcast himself, Pat Damp from KDKA TV. What's it feel like to win a major award like this?
There's a first time for everything, right? It's nice to finally win something. As a Pittsburgh Penguins and Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I've not won that often or enough. So It's nice to finally get a W on the board.
Hold on. For those that aren't watching, what are you wearing exactly? Is that a Mighty Ducks jersey?
This is, in fact, a Mighty Ducks, the original movie jersey of Charlie Conway. Because I always joked with the guys I grew up playing with at the Allegheny Badgers in high school and then with IUP in college. I always said I felt a lot like Charlie Conway because I was great in my own end, but as soon as anything happened in the offensive zone, they were like, it's Damp. He's going to screw it up.
Perfect. That's just perfect. Well, hold on. I was going to save this till the end of our conversation, but let me start here. What made little Pat Damp a hockey fan? What did it for you?
I grew up in a hockey family. My dad was both in the early 90s a Penguins columnist for the old Penguins Report in the Gateway Press. He was also a high school hockey coach. He was a mercenary of sorts as a high school hockey coach. He coached in my life Woodland Hills, North Allegheny, Franklin Regional, Fox Chapel, and he, to his credit, never forced me to play it. He always said he was always kind of a little disappointed that I ended up playing hockey because he was like, man, now I'm going to have to coach. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted him to just play like baseball or soccer or whatever. And he ended up coaching us, and it was a hell of an experience and a lot of fun. And, I was exposed to the game early and I just took to it. And, it's the best thing I've ever done. It's the one thing I'm most passionate about is the sport. I think it annoys the hell out of my girlfriend when I start ranting about the Penguins, and she's like, I barely know what offsides is, so this is wasted on me.
I'm going to just go now. Let me know when you're done. Being a coach's kid, though, that's tough. You just know that you're going to be the one that gets yelled at the most.
Yeah, and that was, when as I got older, I don't want to bring the mood down or anything. My dad passed away a little over a decade ago. May he rest in peace. But early in my hockey playing career, one of the guys that helped him coach, there was a game we lost and he came into the locker room and just tore into me. Just everything was my fault.
Right.
I screwed this up. I did that wrong. I got this wrong, so on and so forth. And the one assistant coach pulled him aside and said, listen, when we win games, do you go in there and just shower them with praise? Well, no, of course not. I praise the team. I praise people who helped us win. So why do you go in there and tear into him when we lose? He's a part of the team. Yeah, he's your kid. You don't want to seem biased, but the way you don't seem biased is he's on the team. That's it.
Yeah.
So it was difficult, but like, it was a great relationship to have with your dad because, once we figured out that there was that boundary of coach and player and son and father and son, it was awesome.
So let me turn it in the direction of what's going on with our team right now, the Pittsburgh Penguins. It feels like Mike Sullivan needs a kid on the team so he can go in there and maybe spark something and maybe kick a couple garbage cans or something. This team cannot get out of their own way early in games. I was talking with Eric Tangradi about this a couple minutes ago. He called it the $1 million question. I don't know what it is. Rickard Rakell had some theories the other night after the loss in Florida. I don't know what the answer is, Pat, for why this team. Is it because they're bored and disinterested? Is it because they're old and slow? Or worse yet, is it both? Why can't this team start faster?
I really liked what Rickard Rakell had to say. If he is thinking about getting into coaching after hockey, I think he might be onto something, because him saying that they want to keep it almost too simple was really smart to me, because I've had the same question all season long. I literally wrote a column, I think a month into the season for KDKA, about how they have this horrible trait of starting games slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't figure it out. It was the same as what you just asked me. What's the problem? Old and slow, disinterested, bored, whatever. But Rickard Rakell saying that they're trying to play almost too simple comes to me as they're playing not to screw up rather than to succeed. And that, in any level of hockey, is a surefire way to screw up. If you're playing not to make a mistake rather than playing the correct way, you're going to make a mistake through hesitation, through just not doing the right things. So I think after all this time, Rickard Rakell saying that might be the answer. Just don't overthink it. Don't play not to lose. Don't play not to screw up. Just play the system. Do what you know how to do best. Push the puck forward. Forecheck hard. Be defensively accountable, rather than I have to be extra aware on defense. I have to get back a step faster. Just play the system.
All right. I have some rapid fire stuff for you here in a second. But first, I'm just going to give it to you point blank. This classic sports talk question of me. Who's this team's GM on July 1st?
I don't think it should be Ron Hextall. I wrote about this last week on Penguins Perspectives. I know that I worked in the AHL and the ECHL. I know it's not the NHL, but I know what weight comes with calling for a general manager, a coach, an executive's job. That's a human being that we have to keep that in mind. I think as sports prognosticators, we lose sight of that sometimes, that we are talking about a person.
Right.
It's not EA Sports NHL 23 where a name just disappears and a new one pops in. But I don't hate Ron Hextall's management style. If this was the first couple of years of Crosby or Malkin's career, great. Don't sell too many things off yet. Keep building. Or if we were in the last couple of years of their careers, same deal. But that's not where we are. They can still produce. They can still play. They're still very good. So you have to empty the tank. You have to make it so this team wins now. And that's just not Ron Hextall's MO. And as much as I know a lot of hockey Twitter will hate this, if Twitter's working right now, who knows anymore, but you have Brian Burke right there. And for all of Brian Burke's faults, he is not scared to make a huge move when his team can contend. And maybe that's what they need. I thought maybe the antithesis of Jim Rutherford was what they needed, but they got it in Hextall, and it's not working.
Yeah, I can't see a path forward back to cup contention with Ron Hextall as the guy either. Like if you want to sit here and continue to live in the middle and be somewhere, messing around with wild card spots or maybe getting through a round or two of the playoffs and that being considered a success, maybe Hextall's your guy for just sort of slightly retooling the roster every year for the last couple of years of the Crosby, Malkin, Letang era. But to your point, they're still it might be the end of their primes, but they're still in their primes and they can still produce. And if the goal is with those three on the roster, and in their primes to constantly be chasing Stanley Cups, then yeah, you're right. You've got to do better than a guy who just feels like he's I don't even know what the term is I'm looking for. I'm failing to find the right words, but it's not half-assing it, because I believe he's doing all that he thinks he can and should be doing, but half measures, I guess. It's Bonino, and I love the addition of Bonino. I like Bonino a lot. I think he's actually the right kind of guy for this team on the fourth line. But Granlund, Bonino, Kulikov, those are the kind of guys you add as periphery pieces on an already really good, almost championship level team. They're not the kind of guys you add to go from first round out to conference finals or cup final.
It's timid, and it's timid, and it's hoping. We do have to give credit for him recognizing the mistake of Kasperi Kapanen and Brock McGinn and getting those contracts off the books. If fair is fair, if we're gonna flame him for signing those deals, we do have to credit him for getting rid of them. But at the same time, those are all hope moves. It's hoping that Kasperi Kapanen finally gets to that potential. It's hoping Brock McGinn's production shoots up. And obviously there's no sure thing in sports. Very few players are the sure thing. But like you said, Nick Bonino, Dmitry Kulikov, those are guys you add to the periphery when you have a very solid roster. And again, in fairness, he's done a very good job at building the top of this roster. Yeah. Bringing back Malkin, bringing back Rust, bringing back Raquel, bringing back Letang, all very good moves and very good contracts, if I might add. But it's everything around it. It's the guys in the bottom six. It's giving Jeff Carter a $3 million extension with a no move
clause. Yeah, don't forget that part.
It's giving Kasperi Kapanen a 2-year, $6 million total extension after he failed to hit even, I think, 30 points. It's hoping that these guys become what you want them to be, rather than going out and getting players that you know what they can be.
Yeah. All right. Real quick, rapid fire before we let you run. It's a game I like to call GTFO or oh yeah. So essentially you're telling me if these things will happen or not. GTFO, that's not happening, or oh yeah, that's happening. So let's start with Jeff Carter will end up in the press box at some point this season. GTFO or oh yeah.
Unfortunately, GTFO. I don't think he's going to get benched. He's too much of a veteran presence that they like. So unless he somehow manages to fall off even more of a cliff, GTFO.
All right. Dmitry Kulikov will at some point supplant Brian Dumoulin, maybe not on the top pairing, but in the lineup. GTFO or, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I think so. I know it doesn't look that way right now with the way lines were at practice, but Kulikov is a classic no real risk, high reward move. He's on the worst analytical defensive team in the history of analytics. And it wasn't because of him. It was just the way that roster was.
Yeah.
He has a lot more upside than what I think people see right now.
All right. GTFO or oh yeah. The Pens can win a series.
Oh yeah. The East is going to be an absolute dogfight. And I do think if they draw Boston in the first round, they may not beat them, but I think it's going to be a much better and closer matchup than people think.
Ooh.
Because if you look at the Winter Classic, even without Jari, for about 56, 55 minutes, they played them very well and did not let them play the system that they play. As soon as Boston could get behind the net and establish their forecheck, that's when they took over the game. But for the majority of it, the Penguins did not let them play the game that has made them so successful.
All right, last one, and then I'll let you run. If Tristan Jarry remains healthy, the Pens can win 2 series. GTFO or, oh yeah.
I got to go GTFO. Okay. And it's not even an anti-Jarry thing. I think he's great. I think when healthy, he's one of the better goalies in the league. But it's just such a stacked Eastern Conference that getting out of the first round for everybody involved, not just the Penguins, is going to be a Herculean task. And I think you're going to have a huge chunk taken out of you by the second round, not to mention the conference final and the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, it's going to be a gauntlet. Thanks for taking some time today, Pat. We appreciate it. Follow him on Twitter at Synonym for Wet, digital producer at KDKA TV 2. He writes a column every Monday for KDKA called Penguins Perspectives, co-hosts a fantastic Penguins podcast that publishes occasionally on their own schedule whenever they feel like it with Jesse Marshall and Mike Darnay called Dying Alive. All your work is fantastic. And again, you named the show, so I am permanently indebted to you, my friend.
I don't know about permanently, but I'm glad to have helped. And as you guys at 93.7 know, I'm a big fan, so it's awesome to be here.
Well, thanks again, Pat. Appreciate the time. Great stuff, dude.
Thanks, Chris.
Great stuff as always from Pat at all of the different outlets that he works at. He always brings it and does so with both some insight and some good humor as well. He came up with the name Fifth Avenue Faceoff, so we had to have him. And in fact, it was long overdue. Feels long overdue that the Penguins have played the Blue Jackets. It's been a while, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been it felt they played twice between now and the end of the regular season, but it feels like this should happen more often. There's a complaint in here somewhere about the imbalanced schedule, but we don't have time for that. Instead, we get ready to talk to Aaron Portzline. He covers the Blue Jackets for The Athletic. He is next on Fifth Avenue Faceoff. Back in on Fifth Avenue Faceoff. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, especially inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY. You follow the show there. You'll get it as soon as it's ready. Several times a week, especially down the stretch. We're beyond the trade deadline now. And the Pens in a weird part of the schedule. They're coming off the Southern road trip, Nashville, Tampa, Florida. They get 2 out of 3 there. They had won 4 in a row before the loss in Florida. And now a spot in the schedule where they've got a five-game homestand that wraps up with the Rangers and starts its own week of chaos, 3 against the Rangers, but starts with the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team the Pens haven't seen in a while. And here to talk about the Jackets, Aaron Portzline of The Athletic. Aaron, thanks for taking a couple of minutes. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Chris. Good to be with you.
Good to have you. What's happened? Like, if you had to give a primer to the average everyday Penguins fan who maybe only pays attention to whatever the upcoming opponent is, and they look up and they say, okay, I got my tickets. I'm getting ready to go down to the rink on Tuesday night. They're playing the Jackets. Okay, yeah, the Jackets. Wait, what is it? Johnny Gaudreau, what? What happened? What's up with the Jackets?
Yeah, so I would say the summary to this season is big question marks at the start of the season. They thought they had potential answers to them. So, good teams in the NHL know who their centermen are, know who their top 4D are. Blue Jackets had question marks there, but they thought decent answers. Cole Sillinger had a really good rookie year. Jack Roslovic finished last year really well the last 2 months of the season with Boone Jenner out. So they're counting on those guys to now be ready for the next step. The top 4D was sketchy. They thought Werenski and Gavrikov could anchor the left side, but no real answers on the right side. How would this fall into place? So first off, they get no positive answers to either of those questions, really. Sillinger's had a really down year, 41 games without a goal now. Roslovic is back to exactly what he's been most of his career, just incredibly inconsistent. And the top 4 never sorted itself out. But then 2 weeks into the season, they just get absolutely waylaid by injuries, which if you don't have the depth of a really good bona fide playoff team, you can't take your best defenseman, Werenski, out. You can't take your leading scorer from last year, Voracek, out. You can't take Laine, Jenner, all these guys out. And they were not a good team when healthy the first 2 weeks. And that left them no opportunity to sort of dig out of this huge hole. And so from U.S. Thanksgiving on, it's been maybe this is the year to bomb it away and do what they've never done here before. Finish dead last and hope for Connor Bedard. It's turned into a lottery season when they thought maybe they could be a borderline playoff team. And just to wrap up this way too long summary, they don't think they're that far away. This year they are, of course. But they think when healthy, with some of the young pieces they've got and some of the veterans that will be back next year, this is not going to be a 4 or 5 year rebuild, that they can be competitive next year, but we'll see.
Well, yeah, I guess there's the first line of questioning here then is how do they view themselves with that next tier of teams in the Eastern Conference? Because it feels like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for so many of those teams that are just outside of the wild card picture right now. Whether it's the Red Wings who have decided to pivot at the end of this season, whether it's the Sabres who are all in on youth and seem to be moving back in the right direction, the Senators who have said, hey, we've had enough rebuild and we're finally going back in on things by going and getting Jacob Chikrin at the deadline. How do the Blue Jackets view themselves? You make a great point. They could finish dead last. They could end up with Connor Bedard. That would certainly be a kickstart to things. But when you go out and get a Johnny Gaudreau and you've got a Laine, shouldn't it feel like they are closer than they are necessarily? Are they really that close?
Well, I'm sort of hesitant to say that they are that close. Just because as much as the injuries have become a crutch here, I can't not see what I saw the first 2-3 weeks of the season when they were mostly healthy and nowhere near competitive. Now, I don't know what that was about. I'm not sure that they don't have a different coach next year, too. Brad Larson is in second year. I think they reevaluate that at the end of the season. Johnny Gaudreau did not come here thinking this was going to be a lottery team.
Right.
Patrick Laine was traded here, not his choice. But let's step back a little bit. Gaudreau's been what you would expect, almost a point a game guy, despite, look who he's playing with. Pretty impressive individual season from him. Laine has a reputation as one of the game's great goal scorers. He has not been that now for 4 seasons. Rather middle of the road. He's got 18 goals, maybe 19 goals for Columbus now. That's a decent season for many. That's not a Patrick Laine season. This is a guy that should be pushing 40. He actually does okay with Boone Jenner at center, but again, that center play, if you don't have centers, what do you have up front? That's one of the luxuries Pittsburgh has had, right? Crosby, Malkin. If nothing else is working, Crosby, Malkin. And it's finding guys who can play with him. But, boy, that's just a start that a lot of teams would love to have. So I don't think they're that far away from being competitive. But there's also some issues I see in the room where you just wonder who's bringing these young players along and who's raising them the right way. I mean, Crosby had Lemieux, I think, was in his last year when Crosby came in. He had Recchi, Gonchar, all these guys, and you just wonder what sort of fostering is being done in Columbus. How is it that Sillinger has a year like this? This Marchenko kid's been a real bright spot from coming in from Russia from last year, and they've got a few. Kent Johnson's had a really good, solid rookie season. There is light at the end of the tunnel. If they stay healthy, of course they're better, but are they there yet? I'm not afraid, and I'm not above saying I don't know. But I don't think they're not a team that should be a lottery team again next year. But I didn't think they were this year either.
Well, who is it that's there, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it? I think back to a few years ago when they met the Penguins in the playoffs, and they had that spark plug. They had that Dubinsky type character who could get under Crosby's skin, under Malkin's skin, and distract them. That was the formula for a few years against the Penguins. The 2012 Flyers laid that blueprint. It worked for a while. I don't think that works anymore. But here nor there, the Jackets are still going to need that guy for everyone to sort of congeal around when their time does come. I understand Boone Jenner is one of those guys. He can be one of those guys, but he's the one with the C on the front of his jersey anyway. But do they have enough of that, I guess, is the question.
Well, they don't. And, it was Dubinsky, but it wasn't just Dubinsky. Dubinsky was singular in he was one of the few guys in the league who thought he liked to play against Crosby. Yeah. Right. There aren't too many guys that would sign up for that. I'm not sure he had all that much success with it all the time, but he was always willing to do it. God bless him. But on that team also, you're talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois, big centerman. You're talking Nick Foligno, character veteran player. David Savard was a rough and tumble defenseman. Seth Jones was a heck of a player. Cam Atkinson is not that kind of guy you're talking about, but a bona fide veteran player and a scorer. They've lost a lot here. They've taken a lot of it. Josh Anderson was that kind of player, a big guy. They don't beat Tampa in that first round series in 2019 without Josh Anderson. They had guys like that. They turned last year, especially. They've gotten a little bit better this year with Goodbranson and Olivier, but they still need more competitive spirit about them. The fighting stuff is, it is what it is. That most of that's gone. Goodbranson can do it. It's not really the fighting you're worried about. It's the competitive play. It's the guys that when the play is cranked up and Pittsburgh's making the push, which they always do, who is in the fight. And they don't have nearly enough of that jam right now. They didn't really then either. But the games those were some great games. Regular season games too. They had a spirit about them. And that's kind of been lost a little bit because they've gotten so very young, so small. And they try to do things and they're trying to play a way that they just didn't play 3-4 years ago under Tortorella.
Well, they haven't played in the last 3 months, but they'll play twice here in the final month plus of the season, including the final regular season game of the year for the Pens is in Columbus. So I'll wrap it up with this before I let you run, Aaron. Sure. It felt like we were really accelerating. We were stepping on the gas towards the birth of a rivalry between these two organizations 5-6 years ago. Does it feel like we've abruptly turned the wheel towards the exit ramp and this rivalry has, I guess, ended before it started, or are we just on pause here for the time being?
Well, I think it just makes sense that geographically, at some point it's going to be that, but it's up to the Blue Jackets, isn't it? I mean, until they take something away from Pittsburgh, it's not going to feel like a rivalry. And I think one of the sad, I don't know, it's sad. One of the more disappointing aspects of this franchise, 23 years in now, is as great as this. And if you're a Pittsburgh fan who's been over here, I would think if you can take off the black and the gold blinders for a second, you say it's a pretty good hockey market. They've been here. The fans have been here despite winning one playoff series in 23 years. How many franchises would still have this sort of fan support outside of most Canadian markets? I don't think there are many. The other aspect of this is nobody truly hates them. Tampa did for a little bit. They took that away from them. And now Tampa's Tampa doesn't worry about Blue Jackets games. They've won 2 Stanley Cups and been in 3 straight. That's not their concern anymore.
Right.
There's no rivalry here. And so in a way, Pete, the fans here have been incredible, and yet they haven't even been given a taste of what this all can be because it hasn't been fully realized. And again, that is on them. That is on this franchise. That's nobody else's fault. They just got to get real, and they got to join the league, if you will. And they're probably, I think most would agree Pittsburgh's in a very interesting spot right now where they're hanging on to the legacy, the winning legacy that Crosby, Malkin, Letang, others have helped craft. I think you sense that maybe they could be heading in the next few years into some tough years where it's not clear if they're going to make the playoffs or not. Mm-hmm. You think Columbus is rising up. Maybe they meet somewhere in the middle. Maybe some of these games start to matter again. But that's one of the things that's been really disappointing is those games were so fun. The Washington games were fun for a while. They used to have a little bit of a rivalry with Nashville when they first came into the league. They were both never had done anything, but they both agreed they hated each other. And now it's just sort of, are they going to get there? Are they going to be there? I think they will. It's a matter of time. They've got to do things the right way here. But right now, they're just still finding their way in so many different ways.
Well, I know they're playing here in Pittsburgh on Tuesday night, but like I said, the regular season finale will be out there. That damn cannon will go off at some point. Well, I'll do that thing where we jump, even though we know it's coming. And the level of your work will not fall off either, Aaron. Always great to catch up with you. We appreciate your work and your coverage as always. And again, we'll look forward to hearing that damn cannon again sometime.
Well, thanks, soon. Man. You may just hear it once if they pitch a shutout. You may just hear it once.
Thanks as always for the time, Aaron.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
That's a good point. The Jackets have struggled a lot this year, so who knows? Maybe you only hear that thing once, and the Penguins will be able to handle business. That's not until the end of the regular season, though. This one on Tuesday night, an opportunity for the Pens to reset after an ugly loss in Florida. Again, the 4 wins leading into that. Hopefully, that's where you carry the momentum from going into this homestand, the final of the 5-game homestand, the first of the 3 against the Rangers in a 7-day span. So it's all coming real fast at the Penguins right now. The games in hand, the games against Metro opponents, the games against the Rangers. It's all happening real quick. The deadline is in the rearview mirror. You better slam on the gas and get to the finish line and get there in a good way and in short order if you're the Pens. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a rating. Leave a review while you're at it as well, wherever you get your podcast for Fifth Avenue Faceoff. We'll do it again on Wednesday when we'll be looking back on the game against the Blue Jackets and ahead to one against the Islanders on Thursday. And then after that, it's a big weekend of Metro Division action. Those games against the Rangers sitting off on the horizon as well. Get inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY. Make sure you're prepared for all of it by following, subscribing to Fifth Avenue Faceoff, and we'll do it again in just a couple of days. Chris Mack and 93.7 The Fan, thanking you again for joining Fifth Avenue Faceoff.